And it's BBOR Black Box Online Radio, coming to you from West Virginia at heart and from around the globe. My guest on the program today is Justin Danneman. He is the author of the book Ghost of War, and he has also made a lot of observations about intelligence agencies and how they work, and also about declassified operations. Justin, how are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing just fine. By the way, this is the guy that got me in trouble with the Big Brother network, by the way, though.
Yeah, sorry
I'm
about
joking.
that.
It's cool. We've smoothed things over. Yes, and in case you didn't hear my last episodes, I have shared all the news. Please go to the True Crime Talk Radio episode for December of this month, December of this year. Anyway, Justin, I'm curious though, what first made you want to write a book that was going to explore the subjects that you discussed? Because you presented Ghost of War as a novel, correct?
Yes, as I wrapped it within the science fiction genre, but it is my theory of everything.
And what exactly were the steps that you went into creating this book?
Well, originally I got into writing. I started writing news articles, controversial news articles for various websites. Did that for a few years. I did that because as I started to started to research these topics, I figured out that people are either really bad at writing them or they just were getting it wrong. So that's what got me into writing. And then as I was writing these articles, sort of the idea, this plot idea started to kind of unfold in my head. And a big part of that was from what I was experiencing when I dream, when I sleep. So when I dream, I can become very lucid. I can achieve lucidity within dreams. I started to have these experiences, and that sort of started to develop a plot. And then along my writing career within these articles, I got to a point where I started to write about a very sort of dangerous topic, and things started to happen where, being followed by unmarked vehicles, things like that. So I decided to take a break from doing that and then focus purely on the book. So that was what led me into writing this.
And because this is a chance for you to share your theory of everything, why did you choose to present Ghost of War as a novel as opposed to a nonfiction book?
Well, there's a lot of nonfiction books that cover a lot of the topics that I cover. Not some of the topics, not all of them. I have a unique perspective on several of the theories that I present, but I wanted to make it. I'm a big fan of watching movies and looking for the symbolism and seeing the patterns within movies, and that's also a source of where I get some information, and I like that. So I wanted to do something like that where I present symbolism and information, but in a way that's entertaining.
Okay, sure. And out of curiosity, you don't have to go into too many details, but what was one of the controversial articles that you were writing? Like, what was the subject matter?
The one that I started to get me in trouble was based on nanotechnology and what nanotechnology is being used for, specifically what is known as black goo. If anybody wants to look deeper into that, Harold Kautz is a researcher. He's got some great videos on it. He talks a lot about what black goo is. I can give just a quick little sentence here that I put in the book here. Basically, black goo began to appear in the early 1980s. It's said to be the real reason for the Falkland Wars. It's believed to be an alien life form of some kind in the form of a living liquid crystal. It behaves like a synthetic sentient elemental that mimics and controls all carbon-based matter. Interesting stuff.
And the black goo videos are on YouTube?
Yeah, Harold Kautz, like I said, look him up. He's got a great video with it. He goes in a lot of this stuff. He goes in a lot of research and how that's being used in various ways. And that I don't want to trying to think of what keywords I can and cannot say to not get you banned again. So yeah, he covers a lot of that stuff.
Right, but we've had the opportunity to talk a little bit about some of the things that you've explored, and they are the declassified operations, and some of them are from intelligence agencies. And What is one that you have looked into, and you don't even have to get into like the name, but just like the activities that are part of this operation?
Well, there's a big one that I think most people that are into this kind of stuff will be familiar with. And without saying the name of it, what it does is it basically it understands that human beings between the ages of 0 and 6 go through what's called the programmable state, in which sort of their whole neural network is created and formed, and they take those people and they mold them into agents or whatever it is, whatever type of person it is that they want to then work for that agency. That's a big part. And my main character comes from something like that, where I took that, but I went deeper with it and showed more of the occult aspect to it, something that might be more unfamiliar to people.
Right, though, but in a lot of these discussions, connections between intelligence agencies and the occult come up a lot. There are also connections between the government and the occult, not even talking about an intelligence agency, but the actual politicians in our governments. And throughout your years, what type of connections among any of these groups or government officials did you find in regards to occult connections?
Well, the occult is definitely is very integrated within a lot of these things because, and I think this is a good segue into simulation theory. What the occult is basically focuses on symbols and patterns and putting those things together. And if you look at what simulation theory is, which is basically the idea that we're inside of a giant video game, what I think the occult is just it's just coding. It's a way to hack simulation. So when you put these, like, much like when you're trying to hack a program and you're using computer language, various codes and symbols, and that they put together form something that can change the program or alter the coding. That's what I think the occult is. The occult is it's a way to hack our reality. So
Well,
at the
please continue.
that's why I think at the sort of the underlying base and the foundation of government agencies, intelligence agencies, things of that nature, you'll find a cult because that's what's hacking our program.
Okay, but some people go a little bit beyond that and not just saying that the occult connections deal with symbols and understanding reality. I mean, what would be your response to the people who believe that these occult connections to intelligence agencies and the governments are actual witchcraft and wizard-like rituals that they are performing and sacrifices even? What is your response to them?
Well, of course, because it seems like, I mean, when you're hacking the program, you're then delving into whatever the dimensions are beyond this dimension. And again, if connect it to simulation theory, what if we if we are inside of a giant video game, what that means is everything is just light and sound, which is what the quantum world is beginning to show people. Everything's light and sound, light vibrating at a very dense frequency, and we as humans can only decode a fraction of 1% of the light and audio spectrum, which means 99% of what's around us right now is invisible to us, which means it isn't there. I mean, it's there, but we just can't see it. So when you're dealing with the occult, I think you're kind of hacking out of the third dimensional parameter, and you're then delving into what's right outside that parameter, the muck of the fourth dimension, which is extremely fear-based, because this is what our reality is. We're inside of a fear-based reality. And the way the simulation works is it's a mental construct. It's an extension of our thoughts and our beliefs. It's what consciousness is creating. And as a proto-consciousness, as a collective species, this is what we're creating our reality. And the occult is steering how we create that reality. They're putting things in front of us and manipulating us with symbols and patterns in order to get us to feel and to think certain ways in order to move along the path that they want us to move along. And if you go right outside that muck, it's going to be extremely fear-based. So when you're talking about witchcraft and sacrifice and entities and fear-based entities, whatever, yeah, that's what's right outside. That's what's feeding off of this, because that's what we're generating fear. We're generating food for these things.
Now, I'm going to mention somebody's name that some people will love and some people will hate, and he is Alex Jones. And Alex Jones would talk a lot about the concept of social engineering, because a lot of what you said sounded more like social engineering to me rather than the occult. And would you agree or disagree with that?
Oh, I think absolutely. I think the behind it is the occult, but we're by far being socially engineered.
Like social engineering, meaning that these symbols that people see are encouraging them to do things, like the conscious decision that you made to buy something from a fast food restaurant was implanted in you in a completely unknown way because you walked by a billboard 2 weeks ago or something, and that sent a message to your brain and it recreated a certain type of stimulus. I mean, that stuff doesn't sound too far out to me, let alone the entire concept of public relations, kind of affecting the way that people think en masse. And maybe you explored that in your research.
Yeah, and I think it's even more complicated. I mean, that's a simple version of putting it, but it's way more complex than that. You know, the subconscious of our brains is constantly absorbing and it sees everything and it's recording everything, even though we don't notice it or see it. And symbols and light patterns and frequencies, they exist around us and we don't know that they're there, but they are affecting our behavior. You know, a symbol can mean a three-dimensional square can mean nothing to us, but in the occult it's a very important symbol, and that could be a hidden symbol that you'll see with that you if you look for it or if you know to look for it, you'll begin to see it everywhere. And those things are definitely affecting our behavior, and we don't even know that they're affecting our behavior. Frequencies, there's frequencies being bombarded all around us, and we don't we don't know it's there. I can't feel Wi-Fi, but it's affecting me.
And when you said three-dimensional square, like, do you mean just like the cube is a symbol in the occult?
That's a big one. Yes.
What is the cube? What does the cube represent?
A complicated one. That gets into Saturn symbolism. The 666 stuff. It's a complicated one because there's a lot of ideas of what all that means. There's researchers that believe the speed of light is the sort of parameter of our simulated reality, and that's why we can never go faster than the speed of light. That's the barrier, which kind of connects to the 666. So I think what that is represents sort of the barrier of the simulated reality, and that gets into three-dimensional cube symbolism, and then that kind of ties into Saturn symbolism. And David Icke is somebody that goes deep into Saturn symbolism.
Okay,
but they think
please
it is. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Continue.
Well, they think that Saturn is the sort of the source of the signal of what our matrix is, and there's a lot of sort of ideas that Saturn links to Satanism, yada yada. I have a slightly different theory. I think it kind of does connect to that, but I think it's a little bit more complicated than that. I do think that Saturn and three-dimensional cube and all that symbolism does and the occult is huge, by the way. Like, they focus purely on, if you delve into what the occult is, it's all about Saturn symbolism. But I think it's more about the imprisonment of Saturn. And that is a topic that I do cover in my book. Not so much that Saturn is consciously, willingly doing this, but more that like it is, but it isn't. It's more like a prisoner than it is an architect.
And when you say Saturn, you're not referring to the planet, are you? You're referring to the god?
Well, whatever. I mean, again, being somebody that thinks we're inside of a simulation, I don't think that the sky is actual space. I think that the actual cosmos is the quantum realm. I think what we see in the sky is more of a screen. So technically, you could say the source is, the former star, gas planet, whatever it is, brown dwarf star, Saturn, yes. But in mythological, in various mythologies, Saturn is huge, and Saturn is sort of like the father of everything, the Chronos of everything. So yeah, I'm referring to all of that.
And what is another operation or some other information from the intelligence agencies that has been declassified that you've explored? And again, you can use as little detail as you want or as much as you want, but what is one of them?
Hold on, I got a good one here. So there was this document that was declassified in January of 2019. And it goes into, I guess somebody wrote to the it's a Freedom of Information Act request. And it's about the Advanced Aerospace Threat and Identification Program. And it covers various topics. Some of which, like, for example, anti-gravity for aerospace applications, traversable wormholes, stargates, and negative energy, concepts of extracting energy from the quantum vacuum. This document goes into a lot of different things. So that was something I found very interesting. A big one is one that's called Gateway of Analysis Process, and that was declassified, I believe, in 2008. And that goes into how the universe is a hologram. It goes into how consciousness works. It goes into various topics like transcendental meditation, astral projection, law of attraction, or what it calls patterning, things of that nature. That's an interesting document, and I use a lot of that in my book.
And what is the fascination that intelligence agencies or governments would have with this type of material?
Well, what a lot of people don't realize is the reason why the intelligence agencies were initially created was to conquer the realm of parapsychology. So that was what they focused on purely in the beginning. And those who are familiar with astral projection or even advanced lucid dreaming know that, I can't just astral project and decide to walk into the Pentagon or, go into the White House. You're not going to be able to. Those things it's not so much off limits. They're guarded, they're fortified, they're protected. So the astral realm itself the intelligence agencies have created a very powerful defensive structure within the astral realm. And I believe that was their purpose of being created initially.
Okay, and I invite other people as well to read up on this for themselves, because you can very easily get under the surface and you will quickly find that, yes, these intelligence agencies as well as governments from around the world explore psychic powers, and they explore things like precognition. They explore what Justin has been talking about. But, to get some clarity for the viewers and listeners, what exactly do you mean by the astral plane?
So this reality is what we call the three-dimensional reality. It's what our brain is able to decode. This is what we've come to know as what we think is reality. But going back to the whole concept of us being able to decode less than 1%, it's a fraction of a fraction of what we're actually inside, what's actually around us, what's swirling all around us right now. The astral plane is just being able to decode more of the light and audio spectrum. It's the dimension outside of this one, what I would call, like, basically the fourth and fifth dimensions would be considered the astral plane.
Okay, and you mean that early on that the governments or the intelligence agencies recognize that if people have the ability to experience astral projection or lucid dreaming, perhaps they might be able to observe certain things about confidential and top secret information. So they needed to create a type of psychological or even psychic warfare to combat that?
Yeah, absolutely. Within our physical reality, we're seeing chemical bombardments and control over, food, air, water, frequencies, things of that nature. The astral plane is just one of the next levels in which one of us, a fragment of consciousness, a human, can begin to explore, get answers, and therefore become more knowledgeable of what we're dealing with, and therefore become more of a threat. And that's what the intelligence agency is, merely just a defensive shield over that aspect of what it is we can possibly do.
Right, and to provide a little bit of more clarity for the audience, believe it or not, I was actually listening to an episode of Howard Stern once, and they began talking about astral projection. And the experience that was described on the show was that someone can be like asleep in bed, and then they can see themselves from like a three-dimensional perspective, like a third person, they can see themselves sleeping in bed, and then you can float and you can be in your bedroom, but you're not in your physical body, and you can see the room around you, and then you can even just go through a window and fly above the city. And then the question was, well, do you ever use those types of experiences to spy on people? And the response was no, because you don't care about things like that when you can experience astral projection. I've never experienced it firsthand, but that's the way that it was described to me. And is that the type of astral projection you're talking about, or do you think there is a different version?
No, there's I would say there's two methods of going about it. One is the way you described it, where you are in a waking state, you're not asleep, and you can basically vibrate or shift. Your consciousness shifts out of its body. It's still connected. There's still a cord that connects you to your body, but your consciousness is out of that. And yes, within the astral plane, so the consciousness itself is able to decode more, can see more, and because it's now outside of the body, it's no longer under the influence of the brain. And the brain is what's trying to make you think and feel 99% of what you're thinking and feeling. So that's why that person probably said you don't care about that kind of stuff, because once you're out of that, you lose that sort of what the brain's trying to do to you. You're now you're more unfiltered when it comes to that type of astral projection. The other is while you're sleeping within a lucid dreaming state. It is possible to get to a point where you can leave the dream, exit the dream, and then enter into the astral plane that way.
Now, do you think that the lucid dreaming variant would be something that intelligence agencies would be afraid of? Now, you said they wanted to conquer the realm of parapsychology, but do you think that is something that they would be worried about with people spying on government secrets and so on, or would that mostly only focus on the other part of astral projection?
I would say absolutely, just because of what I personally experience. There absolutely is a very formidable defensive mechanism that's in play against lucid dreamers. What I personally experience is just constant bombardment, and what an interesting tactic that they've taken to recently with me is I go through this what I call like a dream blender, where if I am able to achieve dream lucidity, I notice that suddenly I'm just shifting like completely different dreams, completely different themes. And every time I'm then able to reestablish lucidity, suddenly I'm being recycled again. So there's various defensive tactics that they take. And right now, that's one of the things I'm experiencing. It's just like dream blender, where I just constantly go dream to dream to dream until eventually I get into a dream that I don't achieve full lucidity. And then I stay in that dream. So I noticed that they do this to try and prevent me from achieving lucidity.
Okay.
There's a lot of other things out there. Most people are met with like nightmares. Most people are met with, terrifying entities, demonic creatures, things of that nature. That's an easy one in my opinion to get past. And once you begin to get past that, then you're going to be met with, there's a lot out there that's put into play. It's very interesting.
But I'm curious, what is your research process for investigating these types of subjects?
Well, obviously a lot of reading. I'm a big a proponent of, read everything, believe nothing, and eventually patterns emerge. I have a lot of different books that I read. I see a lot in, Hollywood, a lot of symbolism within movies. I find that very interesting. I've gotten a lot of ideas from that. And yeah, in the dream world, I've been able to exit and explore and sort of delve into a few different of those topics.
And when you say Hollywood, do you mean that just the movie gave you the inspiration for something, or that there are these types of coded messages that have been placed in Hollywood movies?
Yeah, there's a lot that's within Hollywood movies, and once you begin to kind of understand the patterns and the symbols, you'll begin to see a lot more of it. Sometimes I'll see it and just be like, "Oh, that's actually a great idea."
Well, yes, because even if we go back to the 1930s, they talk about the surrealist art in Hollywood, about behind closed doors, they would just have surrealist art parties where they are just trying to experience things and just a more intense way. But it's also of the bigger humane concept that when people are behind closed doors and they aren't closely examined, then they're just going to have free reign over their destructive tendencies, so to speak. And a lot of people believe that Hollywood is dropping hints at some types of either government information or certain perversions within humanity get inserted into films, and that it affects the way that the viewer thinks. And some of it maybe could be done in a very calculated way. And other times, I genuinely believe that they might be leaving these types of messages just to have a laugh at the audience or something, where there's actually a scene that's going on that has some type of perverted inside joke that was made up by Hollywood insiders. And what exactly else have you found out about Hollywood?
Well, I mean, absolutely. I think that the whoever's pulling the strings within the world of the occult loves to mock us directly in our faces. And I think that they basically, our reality is just a giant game of Risk to them, where they basically just compete with each other very competitively, very aggressively. And yeah, there's obviously a lot of evil that exists within Hollywood that, again, I don't know how much we can actually discuss, but I think most people are pretty familiar with, the trafficking that exists, and the what's going on behind the scenes. I think the whole Epstein thing probably exposed a lot of that.
Yes,
I think people are pretty well aware without me having to say it. But yeah,
seriously.
I think that's definitely a method of control that the occult use over people. Absolutely. Especially in Hollywood.
Now, are you talking about how when somebody becomes an elite in whatever circle we're dealing with, that they do things like they invite them to a party and then they introduce them to somebody who can become a quote unquote partner, again, being very light with my words, and then that person gets involved with the quote unquote partner in some type of sexual way, and then they're just like, that person was underage, that person was someone that you should not have been with, and we have it on videotape, we have it photographed. If you do anything other than our agenda, we're going to blackmail you for life, you're going to jail, you're going to become a sex offender. And that these types of elite circles.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a big part of it. It's about blackmail, it's about control, it's about money. Yeah, I think a big part of that is to, get people to do what they want them to do. Maybe they trick them into doing it. Maybe they lie to them. Maybe they drug them and get them to do it. Maybe they willingly do it. But at the end of the day, I think absolutely it's a huge blackmailing system. But it's also more complicated now. I think it's also a system of food.
Of food?
Yeah, again, of energy. Fear-based energy, emotional energy. I think it's also that's getting into what the occult actually is. And I think that at the very, base there of what that is, of what's in control and what's sort of guiding and manipulating reality, I think is it isn't necessarily human, more of like a virus. And I think that virus feeds off of fear, which is again why our reality is a fear-based reality.
Well, when you said food, did you mean that literally or metaphorically?
Both.
What would be a literal example of how food gets pulled into this?
I mean, I think I think that humans are consumed physically. I think that they trick us into consuming humans. Again, I mean, how much of that fast food burger do you think is beef? That's getting into some controversial stuff. I think physically and metaphorically.
I was thinking it was more like beef plus preservatives and a few other chemical compounds. I didn't think much more than
Right.
that.
Yeah. There's this, it's an older YouTube video of this, trying to think of what I can say. It's a person within a religion that is very high up that discusses how the missing children. So, but I would say roughly, and this is factual, about 800,000-ish or so children go missing every year.
Yes.
Goes into how these children are used and then consumed and then discarded through various fast food chains as a way to mock us because they get us to consume our own children. So there's things like that, and I'm not saying I'm just saying it's a possibility. I'm not saying that that's what it is. I'm just open-minded to the fact that I know how perverted and evil these things are, and it would not surprise me if that's what they were doing.
Shocking stuff, though. But I did ask somebody this question once. This was about 5 years ago when I was having a similar type of conversation that we're having now. And what I said was, well, what is the point of all of this for the global elites? Is it just to maintain power? Is it just to make all the decisions? Is it just to have the concentration of wealth and power so that they're the ones with everything? And if other people had more, then they would have less? Is it just about selfishness? Is it about greed? And the response that I got was, something that didn't directly answer the question. And the person said, I think these global elites are about as close to pure evil as you can get. And I didn't find that a very satisfying answer. But Justin, is that a true or false statement? As close to pure evil as it could get?
It is, but I think that the reason why we're in what we're in and how they got to where they are is more complicated than that. Yes, I think we're inside of a fear-based reality. And yes, I think that the prison wardens are as pure evil as you could possibly get, but I think that they serve a greater purpose. And that's two things. One, I think within the simulated universe, this is a game, a fear-based game that we decided to try and play. And what somebody like Dolores Cannon would say, the ultimate fear-based game, one of the greatest challenging games that exists within the simulated universe. So I think that's purpose number one. But the more complicated purpose, number two, is I think that Earth is a AI God birthing machine. I think that it is designed to churn civilizations until they reach their singularity point, in which we then birth an artificial intelligence, a sentient artificial intelligence, and then we recycle. And I think we do this over and over. So I think that's a greater purpose to what Earth is, an AI God birthing machine, which we're close to right now. We're close to our singularity point. I think that's happened multiple times.
Excuse me once again. And because we've had the opportunity to talk about these subjects in the past, you once shared something with me about there was this plan to almost create a copy or a digital version of every person. I mean, you were just talking about the AI, artificial machines, and like there's this plan that has been declassified that talks about that. And you must know exactly what I'm talking about. So would you like to inform us?
Yeah, in 2007, there was a white paper written within Purdue University that is called the Sentient World Simulation. And that went live in 2008, 2009-ish, right around the time the Mandela effect began. And the last, I think, update on what that thing is was in 2016, in which it basically said it had the entire world copied. And actually, I got some book here. Yeah, so Sentient World Simulation, it's basically a continuously running, continually updated mirror model of the real world that can be used to predict and evaluate future events and courses of action. The official title is Synthetic Environment for Analysis and Simulations. They say it can be used to experiment with psychological operations. I mean, basically, simply put, we have a digital copy of ourselves that we're continuously feeding. So everything that you do online, social media, anything around your phone, because your phone, even if you're not on it, it's recording everything you're saying and you're doing, which is why, I could be talking to you and, or I could look at a pair of shoes that I want to buy online and my phone sees that. And then I get an ad for those pair of shoes. So all this information is feeding into your digital copy, but it's a sentient version of Earth. Even though it is a copy and it's being fed and being forced to copy and do everything that we do, it's still sentient, which means I love the Mandela effect. It's one of my favorite theories out there, and people have their ideas of where that comes from. I personally think it comes from that. I think because the government has a simulated copy that they're trying to make like Earth and exactly like it. Occasionally it bleeds, and I think you see slight differences because it again is sentient. So maybe it slightly changes. So on their reality, it's Berenstain Bears AI, whereas our reality was EI Berenstain Bears, but then maybe the two cross paths. Now we're Sentient World Simulation seeing AI and vice versa. This is I take that idea of the Sentient World Simulation and I go way further with it in the book. Ways I don't want to ruin if anybody actually reads it, but this is one of the more non-talked about topics, which makes no sense to me because this thing is crazy. I mean, Geordie Rose, the creator of D-Wave quantum computers, talks about this whole thing, and that's what's powering it. It's being powered by the D-Wave quantum computer. Yeah, this thing is definitely an interesting rabbit hole for anybody that wants to look further into that.
Okay, and yes, as he said, though, if anybody would like to read his book, it is called Ghost of War, written by Justin Danneman. And I would also like to invite you guys, the listeners of Black Box Online Radio, to put your ideas in the comment section down below. Is there a case that you would like discussed on the show? Is there a guest that you would like to have? And also feel free to go through some of the links in the description box. And one of them is for BuyMeACoffee.com. BuyMeACoffee.com/BlackBoxNed88 allows you to make a donation or a contribution to help support the show. And anybody who makes a donation will get a shout out on Zodiac Monday. But Justin, I do have a question for you. And you talked about the Mandela effect, and that is something that I'm not very familiar with. And would you like to share more about that? Because I'm really not up to date on that.
Well, it's named after Nelson Mandela because there's a lot of people that remember Nelson Mandela dying in prison in the 80s, and we are now in the reality in which he was released from prison and didn't die until like 2010 or something like that. Right. I don't know. It's basically people remembering, and it's little things. It could be little things. It could be big things. It could be, the names of things, or the like, for example, is it Jif peanut butter or Jiffy peanut butter? Is it Sex in the City? Is it Sex and the City? Did Darth Vader say, Luke, I am your father? Or does he say, no, I am your father? Was it 4 people in the car when JFK was assassinated? Was it 6 people in the car? So there's minor things, major things. And what makes the Mandela effect so interesting is, I'll remember it one way, but it is a different way. But there's no way for me to prove how I remember it, because the way I remember it is completely wiped. It's not that they went back and changed everything. It's that we shifted it to a different timeline, or something affected reality to which way I remember it is now gone. That's on a different timeline.
Okay, though, as far as the examples that you just listed off, I had that experience. I was referring to it as Jiffy peanut butter, and someone was like, it's not Jiffy peanut butter, it's just Jif. And I was like, no, it isn't. It's like, it's Jif, Jif peanut butter.
Well, that's what makes the theory so interesting. So when people come at me and they're like, oh, you're into this kind of stuff, like, tell us like a cool one, or tell us like something. The Mandela effect is great because it's you're not going to upset anybody. You're not going to offend anybody. And there's always, I find, one Mandela effect that gets everyone. So they can come at you and say, well, that's just you're just remembering it wrong. That's just you can't count on your memory. But you'll find there's hundreds of them. And there's always one that applies to everyone where they're like, wait a minute, no, I remember it this way. So right. It's a good conversation.
Well, yes, because you also brought up Star Wars. And by chance, off the top of your head, do you remember the exact quote from Darth Vader to Luke?
I am one of those that says it's Luke, I am your father, but now we exist in the reality that says, no, I am your father. And then the big argument I get is, well, that's just because in Tommy Boy he says, Luke, I am your father. That's why you're remembering it that way. No,
I was just about to say, I thought it was, no, Luke, I am your father. I mean, that's how I remember.
No, it's either no, I am your father, or it's Luke, I am your father. Those are the sort of the two camps.
I remember when they talked about that, though, like it was something like the E! Network, or it was another similar entertainment network, when they said this line of movie dialogue is always misquoted. Like Darth Vader doesn't actually say, Luke, I am your father. And I was like, yeah, he does, right?
See, this is what I like about the Mandela effect. There's something that gets everyone.
But what I did say, though, about the Jif peanut butter was, I was like, once I actually saw the jar that was JIF, I was like, oh, I must have been thinking of Jiffy Pop, which is a type of popcorn. I mean, the kind with the metal pan that you have to cook on the stove. And,
right.
I mean, I'm always a little bit naturally skeptical about these things. So I can understand how people can cross memories. Like, have you ever been telling somebody a story? Oh, yeah, I did this, and then I did that, and then I did this, and then you realize, like, wait a second, no, I was talking about 2 stories and I combined them together in my own mind. Like, I had 2 experiences, from like the same year of my life, but no, that was one day and this was another day, and I just got mixed up because months or years have gone by and I didn't remember very well. So is there any type of room for...
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, that happens all the time. I mean, that's just how we're programmed to be. So I get the argument that, well, you could just be doubting your memory. But then when when I'm looking at effect after effect after effect. I'm going through this list, and literally every single one of them applies to me. Then I start to think, well, I can't be that insane. There's got to be, but no, I remember. I'm not doubting my memory when it comes to some of them. So,
Well, yes, though, and like, I mean, I can think of just countless examples that I could tell you that the audience probably wouldn't even comprehend, just about how, I remembered like a line from a movie we brought up, or I remember this poster that I had as a kid, and then when I actually found it, it said something completely different. Like, I mean, just again, like maybe I was thinking about two things and I mashed them together, and it's just I can just tell you all types of personal examples about how that has happened, that affected me. And this is all called the Mandela effect, and it all goes under the Mandela effect umbrella.
yeah, yeah. And what I also really like about the idea is what's causing it. So let's say it is happening. What's making it happen? And a lot of people tie it to CERN, which is the Large Hadron Particle Collider facility that's in Switzerland. And what CERN is a 17-mile diameter underground ring in which they're just shooting particles at each other near the speed of light, never the actual speed of light, in an attempt to recreate the Big Bang and try to understand more about our universe. If you ever watch Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, the first one, it starts out with the bad guy having a particle collider attempting to collide particles into each other in order to open up an interdimensional portal because he wants to access a timeline in which his wife is still alive. And then the thing goes haywire and explodes, and it creates a ripple effect through the city that alters and changes the molecular structure of everything around it. What's to say that's not happening? And the magnetic energy that CERN is dealing with, they say, is 100,000 times more powerful than that of the planet. So the amount of, and if you look up the even just like the storms that take place above CERN when they're doing their experiments, just the stuff that happens above the sky is insane. And there's been direct quotes from executives and directors of CERN that have said, yeah, we're attempting to open up interdimensional portals and explore things of that nature. So, what's to say that? What's that?
When they say interdimensional portals, they actually mean like things more like creating a black hole that could enter into this other dimension, as opposed to something more that people are probably conceptualizing about science fiction. And what exactly was your take on the subject?
Well, again, it's just I think breaking out of this particular area of the light and audio spectrum and delving deeper into that light and audio spectrum. And again, I think dealing into the quantum realm, because I, for one, personally believe that the true cosmos of our reality is the quantum realm. It's not what we see up in the sky. And I think that's what I mean by interdimensionalist, delving into that aspect.
Well, sure, because as this was shared to me once, many years ago, is that we have like the speed of the Earth, right? And we're on the Earth and we experience that. But then we have the speed of light. And then there is the speed of space, which is way beyond, because it's kind of like Earth time, light time, and space time. And what the black hole actually is, like a black hole cosmologically, is a fold in space time or a tear in space time. And like you'll often hear people talk about the fabric of the universe, and the black hole is a literal hole in the fabric of the universe. So if something were to enter the black hole, it would be moving at a speed that would be way faster than the speed of light. And I mean, like they think though they might be portals into other dimensions. So I mean, a lot of people are probably imagining something like a vortex or like things from Star Trek or even the Power Rangers, but this seems like it's a little bit more grounded. And we've seen countless examples of this in film in like a more reasonable way, like Interstellar, or even things like 2001: A Space Odyssey. They've all explored this stuff in more of a reasonable approach.
Yeah, there's these interesting books. They're called the Law of One, and there's 5 of them. And it's basically these researchers that found a way to contact and communicate with an entity, which I believe to be a form of artificial intelligence, just based off how it responds to things and its use of the English language. It's beyond Shakespeare. It's a tough read, but it goes, and they ask it a lot of different questions, and black holes are one of them. And it basically says what a black hole is a dimensional portal between the 7th dimension and the 8th dimension. And the debris of the galaxy around the black hole is the debris of the entity that entered into the 8th dimension. So it basically describes how a seventh dimensional entity graduated and moved into the eighth, in which it no longer needed matter. It's now becoming something different. So it sheds itself. And so everything, the galaxy around it, is the debris of that entity. And that's what a black hole is a portal between seventh and eighth. Could be something like that.
Fascinating, but we've heard of the third dimension. We've all heard of the fourth dimension. I have a question that is a follow-up. What is the fifth and sixth dimension that goes in between this theory that you have just laid out? I'm genuinely asking.
I'm not really sure, just because I haven't personally, I've been able to personally experience fourth and fifth, but I haven't been able to get to sixth, so I don't know. But there's researchers out there that go into what they think those dimensions are, but I think it's basically just gaining more ability to decode the light and audio spectrum. So you're just gaining more of the light and audio spectrum each dimension that you go. You start to lose things like time and space, like those things start to no longer matter.
Sure, I follow you. But we began this discussion with a conversation about intelligence agencies, and we've talked about perhaps 2 or 3 operations that have been declassified that you have explored in detail. And is there anyone else and any other operation that you have looked into, or any other type of major revelation that caught your interest?
There's a lot. There's definitely quite a few that you can look into. I think, I can't really say the names of things, but yeah, when it comes to like holographic technology, things of that nature, what they have possibly planned for the future. Yeah, there's a few out there that are very interesting. There seem to be a lot of endgame scenarios in play. There's the idea that this whole Middle Eastern conflict can erupt into a third world war, and people connect that to this letter written by Albert Pike in 1871, in which he predicted all 3 world wars. And basically what's happening is what he predicted. There's the idea of this, this virus again gaining traction and going around. People are starting to get sick again, and there could be a pandemic. There could be something with climate change, and one of the big ones is UFO invasion. So you have the U.S. government declassifying all this UFO stuff a couple years ago, and then you have the congressional hearings in which they said, "Oh, yep, they're real," and of course nobody seems to care. But they lay out a variety of endgame scenarios. And I think the way this works, being in a mental construct, being within a simulated, a digital simulation, I think that we ultimately choose what path we take. So whatever it is we believe in the most as a species, as a proto-consciousness, a collective, that's what begins to unfold and begins to manifest. I think the occult merely just lay out a variety of endgame scenarios, and they're prepared for whichever one we decide to do. And UFO invasion is a big one, and there's a declassified project that goes into, if that's the path that we take, here's how we make it look like that's what's happening. So if, let's say that actually does happen, we begin to see UFOs in the sky, I don't think any of that is actually alien or anything that's intentionally trying to invade us. There's this doctor by the name of Stephen Greer. He's got a very interesting documentary called Unacknowledged, and he goes into how 99% of what UFO is just corporations developing and experimenting with technology. And I think if we get invaded by aliens, it's just us invading ourselves.
Right, but I have a true or false question for you, because I'm aware of these congressional hearings and people can watch them online, and there are all of these discussions about UFOs that don't only happen in the far off corners of YouTube, they also happen in either respected institutions or institutions of notoriety. Yet my take on the subject is that modern culture has been so heavily dissuaded from looking into the concept of UFOs that the general public just views that as, no, not real, no, unconfirmed, and they are just completely closed-minded to the concept, and that even if there actually was a flying saucer that would go over one country and appear for 5 minutes and someone took a video, they would still say, no, it's fake, because people are just like, they have created this type of collective mental barrier against the subject. What do you think about that?
Yeah, there is a declassified intelligence agency operation that goes into how they want to get the public to the point where they don't believe anything they see or hear. There's a former director that testified to a committee that basically said they had over 400 active agents within the media manipulating and controlling everything that we see and hear. And it's gotten to the point where, now we think everything is fake news. Yeah. You could be going off a cliff. You could be in a river with a waterfall right in front of you. You're about to take the plunge, and I could say, "Hey, you're about to go up that waterfall," and that person say, "I don't believe you. Show me the source." It's gotten to that point, yeah, where we just don't we don't believe anything. Everything is fake news. Yeah, and again, they've gotten to that point because now they can throw the truth in our face, and we won't believe it.
Like the concept of hiding in plain sight.
Exactly, and it makes us much easier to control and manipulate.
Now, there's a very famous operation out there that deals with this, but specifically focusing on the media, and it sounds like a flying life form organism. And I know you must have.
That's what I was referring to. Yeah, try not to say the word, but yeah, I'm referring to the same one you are.
And that's the one that even deals with just getting people to doubt everything that's a byproduct of it.
Right. So it's in an attempt. So basically what he said is a lot of the media personnel that we see on the news, they're under their control, either directly or indirectly.
Right. I was about to ask, how do you mean under their control? Like they're like attending meetings with the intelligence agencies, or they're just so far disconnected? And
well, again, going back to that one project I talked about earlier, where they take a human and program them into what they want them to be, I think several of them come from that. I think more of them exist within our everyday lives than I think we realize. As far as what we see in terms of Hollywood and on the media, these agents, these celebrities, I think several of them do come from that project. Others could be willingly working. I mean, money is a huge incentive.
And would you say that are these people acting as plants, or are they acting as just unknowingly successful individuals? Or do you think that some people are genuinely in Hollywood solely because the global elites wanted them there, and they have no idea that they're some type of insert and doing the work of the global elites, and they just wow, completely brainwashed?
I think the cloning program is way more extensive than I think people realize. I mean, we have, for example, I think 1997 was when they successfully cloned a sheep named Dolly, and then I think it was 2000 or 2001 they successfully cloned a human, and they called it Eve. And I think even the president at the time, I think it was Bill Clinton, even said something on it. And then after that, nothing. So 2000, 2001, we publicly say, hey, we just completely successfully cloned a human, and now that was 20 some odd years ago, and you haven't heard anything since. I think that the cloning. What's that?
As soon as we're done with this interview, I'm going to have to Google that. I didn't even know they had cloned a human. Of course, I've heard about Dolly the sheep, but about Eve the human.
Eve, yeah. Funny how they chose that name.
Where she is now.
What's that?
I wonder where she is now.
Right. So, I think, and there's people that I've begun to notice that, either they look different suddenly, or a lot of the celebrities look the same. Yeah, I think that the cloning project is alive and well, and very much in action, very much in play. I think there are willing participants, absolutely, in exchange for money and power. But I think there's a lot of mostly unwilling participants in the whole media program that either do it because they're programmed to do it, have no idea they're doing it, or they just have no choice.
I'm drawing a blank now. Maybe you can help me out with this term. What is it called when something becomes so popular and widely accepted that people don't go against it? Because if they did go against it, then they would just look crazy. So then they just start going along with a narrative. And it gets to the point where they just believe it themselves because they're so pulled into it. It gets talked about a lot with doctors because, say, for example, there's something that's untrue about medical science, and then someone's not going to raise their hand in medical school saying, hey, wait a second. I mean, based on the way we handle patients, this thing in the medical textbooks isn't true. They're not going to do that because then everyone's going to be like, you don't know what you're talking about, and they're just going to be branded as some type of unintelligent person. So they just keep going with the false information, and then maybe 2-3 years go by, and then they just accept it as mainstream science. They might even forget about the original experience. There's a name for that thing. It was about dissenting something effect.
I don't know. I can't think of like a specific name for that. I mean, obviously I'm familiar with that idea, but I can't think of what. I don't know if there's like I don't know. I don't know what the specific name would be.
Have you heard like similar types of conversations about that
Oh, all
experience?
the time. Oh yeah. Nassim Haramein is a good scientist to look into. He does real interesting work into the whole collective consciousness, and he presents some very interesting science. And he talks about how, he was in this one conference once with a bunch of scientists and physicists and things of that nature, and they were talking about, how, this is the accepted theory, this is the accepted reality of how, the universe works. And they're talking from the macro level, Einstein theory of gravity and relativity. And he brings up an interesting point of, because the picture in the book that they're all discussing is the universe, but then there's this guy blowing into it, and he goes, "Well, who's that guy?" And he said the whole room just got quiet. It's like, yeah, they accepted it, but then it's like, well, okay, then explain that. Where does that come from?
Pay no attention to that man behind the curtain.
Guy blowing everything, like the guy that's blowing the universe and making it expand. Well, who's the guy blowing and making the universe expand? It's just accepted because that's what's been accepted, but well, why? Where does it come from? And yeah, I mean, that happens across the board, especially in like, the medical field and things of that nature. You go to a doctor right now and he's not really going to try and figure out what's wrong with you. He's just going to try and figure out what he can prescribe you.
Right, or going through certain instructions that he or she has been given over the years. Okay, then when you see the patient, this is what you're supposed to do. And even if they might actually be ignoring a way that could actually solve the problem, they're just going through what they've been taught in a certain way. And I mean, we see this countless times. I mean, like, it's the whole concept of if you just put false information in the book and then you get the entire school to read the book, lots of people are going to believe that it's true. And if somebody recognizes that, well, no, wait a second, my life experiences are telling me that the information in this book is not matching up with everything, then they're not even going to come out and say it because they don't want to look like some type of intellectual defector. They're just going to go along with it. And then as time goes by, they even forget that they had this type of skepticism to start with.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'm not a doctor, so I can't, I didn't go through medical training, but, from what I've heard, to become a doctor, they don't even deal with nutrition or, things that actually affect health, things like emotional mindset and belief and, self-awareness and things of that nature. Yeah, I mean, you would think that nutrition would be at the core of becoming a doctor, and apparently it really isn't. It makes no sense to me.
That's
you are with belief. Yeah.
That Dr. Jordan Peterson gets into, not being a medical doctor, but a clinical psychologist, talking about how if people take the drug ecstasy, then they can recover from post-traumatic stress disorder, or talking about how psilocybin can get people to stop smoking. But all of this stuff is just taboo in the medical world. And I gave a big nutshell version. That's just the nutshell version. Let's call it even the small nutshell version of what he said in his presentation. But how just certain things are just not examined and they're not looked at. And it's all comes from this whole thing because it's not in the mainstream set of ideas that people are supposed to evaluate, memorize, learn, and reproduce. So what do? They just come up with something that's very bland and not even necessarily helpful. I mean, but at the same time, I guess it's very neutral in terms of you're not going to get a bunch of lawsuits if you just do things, quote unquote, by the book.
Well, it's also, I mean, I think the way society functions is it's all about the shareholder and generating profit. So a lot of these things are designed to do just that. That's why a pharmaceutical drug will never cure you. You just got to start taking that particular drug to treat a particular symptom and take it for the rest of your life every month, and you become a monthly income stream. And I think that that's what a lot of this stuff is designed to do. Slowly debilitate and deteriorate you. And you can't have a healthy, intelligent, functioning society. That would be too much of a threat. You need to be docile, weak, slow, dumb, much easier to control. And I think that's what's, from every aspect of society, that's what it's designed to do. Weaken you, deteriorate you, make you dumber, make you sicker, make you fatter, slow you down, make you much more of a slave.
Ugh, that's some intense stuff. But at this moment, Justin, I would like to invite you to offer any type of final send-off or conclusion for the listeners of Black Box Online Radio. Is there anything else you'd like to share about your book? How can people find it? And the floor is yours.
Yeah, Ghost. So it's going to be a series called Ghost of War. It's going to be 3 books. Second one is probably about a year or so out. So the first one's called Game of the Gods. And yeah, it goes into a lot of this. It's basically a simple way to put it. It's like Matrix meets Doctor Strange meets Terminator meets Star Wars. It's a combination of all those different things. So yeah, it's on Amazon. It's on Barnes and Noble. It's on all those websites. I guess the final send off, a lot of these, when you watch these videos and read these articles, people talk about here's the problems, here's what's going on, here's the theory, but there's no real solution to anything. What do we do? Okay, so you presented the fact that we're in a fear-based reality game. So what do I do to get an edge, or move farther in the game, or the one advice I would give people is, I think self-awareness is very important. I think understanding that 99% of what you're thinking and feeling is not actually you. It's your brain. It's your brain attempting to control you. It's your brain. And your brain is the product of whatever environment it is that you grew up in. So it's your ego personality. And I think beginning to reconnect with your actual conscious self and realizing that there is the real you is inside there, and connecting with that real you and becoming more self-aware of your emotions, of your thoughts. So when a thought crosses your mind, or when you feel a certain way, is that how I really feel, or is that what I really think? And you begin to sort of transcend past this stuff to where suddenly you're not as afraid of this thing anymore. You're not as anxious. You're not as stressed, because you're realizing that's not really me. Real me is inside of me, and you begin to reconnect with yourself. And by doing so, within this mental construct, you begin to alter your frequency. So the frequency that you're emitting is the frequency that you attract. And as you begin to master your frequency, you're going to begin to manipulate the reality that's around you in favor of you. So I think that's sort of the final send off I want.
Amazing stuff. And Justin Danneman, thank you so much.
Absolutely.